Hello everybody, I'm Mike Fitzsimmons and welcome to this special conversation with the candidates for the 4th District Representative position number 2 in the Spokane Valley area. This is not a formal debate as such, an opportunity to compare, contrast the various positions of the candidates. We have 3 Republicans and a Democrat at the table this morning. Leonard Christian is here, a Republican. Lance Gurel is a Democrat. Rob Chase, a Republican. And Nathan Sybrandy is a Republican as well. We're going to allow these candidates to introduce themselves, and we're going to get into a round of questions. I think one of the things, gentlemen, we can all agree on is that the next legislative session is going to reflect a great deal the effects of the coronavirus and the COVID-19, and a lot of policy is going to be formed around that. So some of the questions that we're going to be asking are going to arise from those possible observations. So let's just begin. Lance, we have you tell us who you are first.
Very good. Hello. My name's Lance Gurel. I'm an accountant. I'm running for District 4 State Representative. I moved to this area about 20 years ago with my wife, Kimma. We live here with some of our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. We moved back to this area. It's where her family is from. And after living all over the country, I really have found that it's the best place that I've ever lived to live and raise a family. I live here because I really have chosen this place. I'm running for office because I took civics when I was in school, and I really believe in government of the people, for the people, and by the people. It's for individual, ordinary people like me to step up and have our values heard. I'm an accountant, a CPA. I really believe that I'm the best person to go to Olympia to express the values of Eastern Washington in these difficult budget talks that'll be coming up.
All right. Mr. Christian.
Well, thank you, first of all, Mike and Kent and Spokane Talks for opening up this forum for us to be able to reach out to the people and talk to them. I'm former Washington State Representative Leonard Christian. Since I've been in Olympia in 2014, the budget is more than doubled, or almost more than doubled here real soon. And people, the governor has signed K through 12 sex education into law, and I believe he's abused his emergency powers. I'm running for state representative so I can protect businesses and families and ensure that this COVID recovery does not come out of their pockets. I was raised here in Spokane, got married 9 days after high school from graduation from Ferris, still married, 36 years now. And after retiring, I moved back here and started a career in real estate, which I've done very well. I believe my time in Olympia, I was able to make a lot of friends there. I was able to work on both sides of the aisle. I was able to get a bill passed in a short session. So I believe I know what's going to take to provide the leadership for our district to be able to get back open for our community and get our kids back to school. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to your questions today.
All right. Mr. Chase.
Yeah, I'm Rob Chase, and I've lived in Spokane Valley for since Expo 74 pretty much. And I came here when I was 21. And I was elected county treasurer and re-elected again. And I won as a write-in the first time. And the Spokes Review called me and said, well, we didn't have a chance to get to you. We didn't think you would win. So what are your goals? I said, well, my goal is to become a good treasurer, remembered as a good treasurer for Spokane County. And my goal now is to be remembered as a good legislator for the 4th District.
All right, and Nathan Sybrandy.
Thank you. My name is Nathan Sybrandy. I'm a lifelong Washingtonian. I grew up on a rural farming community just down the road from my family's dairy farm in Skagit County. I met my wife at Seattle Pacific University, where I got my degree in nursing. She worked towards being a rural family physician. She's now a third-year medical student at the University of Washington Medical School at the Spokane campus. We have an amazing community out here in the 4th Legislative District, and I want to try to make it better for my future children and for yours. I hadn't planned on running this year or anytime soon, but with COVID-19 dominating the headlines, I knew now was the time for a medical professional to get into the race. As a nurse and a conservative, I'm uniquely qualified to understand the challenges that we face. Unlike our governor, I understand that economic health is part of public health, and I'll fight to see this reflected in our public policies. With COVID-19, massive budget deficits, and spiking unemployment on the horizon, we need the calm demeanor and the staunch advocacy of a nurse to fight for our rights, unify the Republican Party, and protect our vulnerable populations. That's why I'm running to be your state representative.
All right, and thank you. Now, the format is very simple. I will ask a question of a candidate. That candidate will have the opportunity to respond to that question, and each of the other candidates will have an opportunity to comment on that question as well, either to express their differences with others or to project their own views on that particular point. We'll then wind back with the initial speaker, who will have a redirect at the very end, then we'll move on to the next round. And that's how this will work. And we'll begin with you, Lance. And let's talk about you and Mr. Christian both mentioned the budget in your introductory remarks. Pretty important, pretty obvious, and obviously with respect to the coronavirus and the effects it's had, it's going to be a rather immense focus of attention in the next legislative session. In fact, there is projected to be about a $7 billion deficit. All right, and the Democrats, of which you are one, are going to suggest, if they haven't to you already, that this is an excellent time to take advantage of the crisis and introduce at long last a state income tax in Washington State. What say you about that?
Okay. I'm an accountant. I'm a fiscal conservative. In fact, accountants, that's all we are. I believe in budgets. You don't spend money that you don't have. I am a money guy. I really believe I'm the best person to be able to go to Olympia and work on the difficult budget problems without having the pressures from one side or the other. As accountants, we look at things, look at both sides, consider all views. As far as looking for new revenue sources, I do believe now is the time to have a sophisticated conversation about new revenue sources for the state of Washington. I do not believe in raising the tax burden on individual taxpayers. I've joined a pledge that I would not consider raising taxes on anybody making less than $1 million a year. I don't believe that we should have more tax burdens run through our businesses through the business and occupation tax. But I do think it's time to have a sophisticated conversation about having high earners in the state reinvest some of the money that they have in the remanufacturing of Washington, and to help us get Washington going again. Again, no new taxes, no increase in taxes. In fact, if we could get some tax revenue from high earners, we could reduce taxes like our sales tax and reduce the B&O tax that would lessen the burden on businesses and individuals. So I think there'll be difficult budget conversations to be had. I'm not afraid of those. I'm not afraid of looking out for what is best for all the families living in Eastern Washington.
So to be clear, I didn't hear you say you would favor an income tax or not favor one. It sounds like you're talking about a focused income tax on high-end earners.
I think that making the changes that we need to in the Constitution to allow a capital gains tax on high earners is something that should be on the table. If we're talking about graduated income tax, I do think it's the American way that people who can contribute more to our community do. And so I would say a very focused graduated tax on people making over $5 million a year. No, that shouldn't be off the table.
All right. Mr. Chase?
Well, this is thrown our whole state, our whole country into, we have to rethink a lot of things where we're at. I'm definitely against an income tax because that discourages productivity. And there are some options too that might be looked at. I'm all for a state bank like North Dakota has that would make loans for infrastructure, an infrastructure bank, and maybe even participatory loans to smaller banks that have a business that they can't quite afford. Loaning the credit that they need, a state bank could actually participate in that participatory loans. Another idea too is taxing the big internet companies like Facebook and Google and YouTube, and because they actually derive profit from residents of Washington State, and no one taxes them for the information they take from you that they use and make a profit out of. So as long as they're taking our information, giving it to other people, they need to be taxed on that, I think. So that's another avenue. Now, I was county treasurer, I collected property tax, but still I was, it's kind of like you never own your home. You're renting your home from the government. It's a problem with property taxes. And then a sales tax, well, a lot of people say it's regressive, but there is a fair tax that I think if implemented, it protects those below the poverty level with a prebate, as it's called. They're talking about it, especially at the national level, but it could possibly be another thing for the state level too. And a lot of people actually think there is an economist named Henry George with a land tax that a lot of professors still think would be the best way to go.
Mr. Sybrandy?
Yeah, I mean, there's always this delusion that gets thrown around that all these rich people are just hoarding money in their Scrooge McDuck-like vaults, and I think it's kind of a delusion, to be honest with you, because the reality is people who have means are investing their money in the stock market. That's where it is. So it's being invested in businesses as it is. So if you tax it, you're taking it out of the free market, and when we're in a recession, we already have a crunch on credit, and small businesses and medium-sized businesses rely on the free flow of that credit and capital in order to continue surviving, especially when they're on the rocks. So in my humble opinion, the worst thing we could possibly do right now would be to manually reduce the amount of capital that's circulating in that system. I think we need to be doing everything we can to increase the amount of capital that's in that system. We need to be looking at, for businesses that were forced to shut down by government fiat, we need to be looking at some sort of B&O tax holiday to try to support them. And we need to be doing everything we can to make sure that our small businesses can survive, if not thrive, in this political environment, or in this economic environment, rather.
All right, Mr. Christian?
Well, let me make it really clear. I do not believe in an income tax. The voters have made it very clear they don't want one. I know one of the reasons I moved back to Spokane was because there was no income tax on my retirement from the Air Force. So I'm a firm believer in not that, or even a capital gains tax, to be honest with you. As one of these candidates here said, they hope that they can tax some of the higher folks so they can reduce other taxes on other people. I've been here a long time. I don't seem to see the sales tax ever being reduced on anyone. And so I don't believe the government believes in reducing taxes. They just enjoy adding more to bring more money into their coffers. And again, when I was in the legislature in 2014, the budget is almost doubled. Has the government got double better? Has the government provided double the services? I don't think so. We just end up paying more taxes into it. And our businesses already have basically an income tax on them. Our B&O tax is extremely aggressive. They take a tax off of every dollar you earn that comes in the office. I pay this as a realtor on every dollar that I earn. Doesn't matter what you take home or what your net is. It's just a matter of every dollar that comes in, they're going to tax it. I believe our economy was in the last 3 years was shown an example of what less taxes and less regulation can do. It went to a massive economy. The stock market was at all-time record highs, and it was just because our president removes regulations, lowered taxes, and says get out there and earn a living. And I believe that's the way to go for our state. Get the government out of the way, get the private businesses doing their job again.
Mr. Gurel, follow up.
We have a budget shortfall that's predicted to be, for this year alone, over $4 billion. If we were to take all the money from our rainy day fund, all the money from all the reserves, that's only $3 billion. I think we have to have common sense discussions. I think we have to have realistic discussions. I do not believe that we should be reducing services on our schools, on our first responders, on our daycare and early education facilities. We have really essential infrastructure that needs to continue, and I think it's a little bit pie in the sky to say that we can just get by cutting a few corners, because this is massive. And it's going to take some realistic voices at the table, and as an accountant, I'm the person for that.
All right, let's move on to another topic, and Mr. Sybrandy, we'll start this one with you as a nurse, a member of the medical community. You're, I'm sure, watching closely what's going on with everything from the CDC, to the Food and Drug Administration and all the rest of that, as well as policy arguments that are being made by a variety of private physicians and what have you. In any event, right now, the states are talking about whether or not to open schools in the fall. And you know that children, according to the latest medical data, don't generally catch COVID very easily and do not usually transmit it to anyone else either. And so the question is, why shouldn't they be in school? The American Pediatric Society recently indicated that children will suffer psychological harm greater than the pandemic if they're kept out of school. So even though that decision has not been made yet exactly about what Washington's going to do you favor sending kids back to school in September?
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth there. That evidence seemed to increasingly indicate that kids don't tend to pass COVID along to adults, and so in my mind, there's not a lot of reason to continue to keep schools closed. The fact of the matter is, the people who are going to be most harmed by this are not only just our kids in terms of psychological damage, it's actually our kids with disabilities. And they're the most vulnerable ones of all. They're the ones that if they don't get those in-person early interventions, and particularly thinking of kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, autism, Asperger's, if those kids don't get their early interventions, particularly in an in-person socialized setting, they lose those gains permanently, and that's a huge, huge issue. So we need to be doing everything we can to make sure that that if there's not a compelling reason to withdraw those interventions from those kids, that they get the services that they need.
All right, Mr. Chase, your thoughts?
Well, I think Governor Inslee way overreacted on all of this. We're not even sure if the masks themselves really do any good. And but we need to look at the hidden costs, and I think Nathan talked a little bit about that. The hidden costs that we don't really see are all the businesses that we're going under. A lot of them are just kind of hanging on. And we need that capital, that turnover, that velocity of money turning over to actually collect taxes. Now, sometimes you can tax too much and you get less revenues too. You got to be careful of that. So everything you tax has to add value. But this decrees from Governor Inslee is kind of like, it's like central planning. America is decentralized. We have our federal, our state, and our local governments. And if we're going to make a mistake, we need to err on the side of freedom rather than dictate. So I think the hidden costs, to families, to schools, to businesses, family breakups, suicides, and all that is way overpass what anything happened. And the other thing is, our last big emergency we had was 9/11. We passed the Patriot Act, we passed the National Defense Authorization Act, we passed the TSA Act and FISA, and those were all supposed to be temporary measures. Well, we have them 20 years later today. It never went away. So I'm worried about what's going to happen with this COVID virus. And if we go to Olympia, whichever one of us it is, we need to see whether these taxes are adding value or waste.
Mr. Gurel?
I too would hope that we'll be able to send children back to school in the fall. Unlike some of the other candidates, I think that the evidence in favor of masks is overwhelming. I think that our governor should have instituted a mandatory mask order sooner. I think that the sooner we mask up, the sooner we'll get over this. This isn't just, this is the way that people have been handling pandemics in this country for centuries and in the world, for centuries and in the world for centuries. I mean, in pandemics, people mask up and we get over them. I think that the pandemic highlights how important it is that we move toward having health care available for everybody. It's not just that I care about my neighbor having health care for their sake, which I do, but for my own sake. I want everybody in the community healthy.
All right. Were you finished?
If I can add one other thing, I think that this crisis, the pandemic, and in particular when you talk about schools, it's really highlighted how important child care is to the infrastructure of our community. We need to make investments in guaranteed child care so that everybody has the child care they need. I'm a grandparent. I'm the one who gets the call oftentimes at 5 a.m. because someone's called to make an extra shift. Our businesses need good child care, and I think this pandemic has just highlighted that.
Okay, Mr. Christian.
So I want to make it pretty clear. I did support our president and even our governor when this first came out because nobody knew. And so we closed down, we kept our kids at home. But you know what? About 30 days later, I start driving by the skating parks and around the different parks in the area, and they're just filled with children. Filled. There was no social distancing. There was no mask. The children were just spending time together, but out of school. So if masks are so incredibly effective and hand washing is effective, why aren't we just getting our young folks back into school with masks and more hand washing stations? I'd be happy to support more hand washing stations. However, there's no plan. Right now, no parent can tell you if their child is going to be in classroom or not come the fall. And so how do you as a parent make a plan for you to go back to work or for you to get babysitters or whatever when you have no clue what's going to go on? How does the school district plan on hiring teachers or not hiring teachers? Because there's no leadership from the federal government at this point, and there's no leadership, especially from our state government, on what's going to go on here in the future. So I believe 100% we need to get our young folks back into class and back into where they're going to learn the social skills along with the academic skills. So going forward, I think we need to come up with a plan now, not later, and let the public know what that plan is going to be.
Nathan Sybrandy, a last observation on this one?
Yeah, interesting to see how the question has turned from public education to public health all of a sudden, but I'm certainly happy to talk about public health as a nurse. Yeah, no, I am personally in favor of masks. Droplets spread. The droplets that you spew from your mouth that are filled with viral particles, they're usually larger than the pores even of your cloth mask. Everyone knows cloth masks are super uncomfortable, so I do think that it's a good idea to wear them in public in areas that are where social distancing is difficult. But if Governor Inslee wanted conservatives to trust him and wear masks in public, the dumbest thing he could have done was mandate them. It was just a really, really idiotic idea. Conservatives don't trust public health institutions. There's a lot of really good reasons for that I want to talk about later when we get to public health as the actual question. But I want to save it for that, But in any case, masks are a good idea. Mandating them, really not a good idea.
All right, let's move on to another subject. We'll put this one to you, Rob Chase, and that is this. There is a growing call around the nation for the defunding of police departments in major communities. Question for Washington State, is that a viable option in Washington State? And if it isn't, what remedies do you favor to reform law enforcement practices or procedures?
I think you have to find the right balance of police power and freedom. So I think the police are doing a good job. A lot of what they do, they go through constant training. And of course, with that many, tens of thousands of police around the country, you might find a few bad apples in that amount. And then it suddenly becomes, it's kind of like the environmental movement where the spotted owl signified everything. It's sort of like this Floyd person it suddenly became a talk about person, it all became about that instead of there's all the tens of thousands of policemen. It's a hard job, you know. My best friend, we were growing up, he wanted to be a policeman. He wanted me to be one with him too, and he did pretty well. I just wasn't built that way, you know. But other people are, and most of them have a sense of honor, kind of like the White Knights. You know, maybe they read those stories about the Round Table doing justice and all that. I think most of them are that way, but some people get into it and slip through the net. That, you know, so it'd be extremely foolish. You know, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? You know, if you have a problem like that, you've got to, you know, even though they kind of arrive mostly, you know, in time for cleanup and all that, still there's a threat around that. There's a lot of respect for people, and I think, you know, we just shouldn't change things. Now, something might require legislation once in a while, but, you know, you get that from a variety of stakeholders, what should be done.
Mr. Gurel.
I think the subject that's really relevant here is that I believe in community control. And much as some of my opponents have said about other issues, I think that it's up to communities to decide what kind of law enforcement they want to have, which means civilian oversight of law enforcement. It means that sheriffs don't get to decide which laws they want to enforce and which they don't think are constitutional. It means that the community decides this, and we put the power with the people to hold their law enforcement accountable. Now, we're running for the state legislature. I think it's one of the things that the state can do is to mandate community control. Now, that I'm not saying that the state should tell our community what they should do, but the state should say that in Spokane County there is going to be civilian oversight of the police departments and the sheriff's office in that jurisdiction. I too have friends and family in law enforcement. It's a tough job, and Mr. Chase is right. They often don't get the respect that they deserve, but they also don't deserve qualified immunity, and we don't deserve to have police unions dictating for us as a community what kind of law enforcement we have. It's as though they think they know better than we do, and honestly, I trust the people on this one.
Okay, Mr. Christian.
Sure, thank you. So on July 3rd, 1984, I raised my right hand downtown in Spokane and joined the United States Air Force. I made a whopping $714 a month. So as you can imagine, I did not join the Air Force for the money. I joined the Air Force because I cared about my country, and I wanted to get out of my childhood situation, being raised in poverty from a single parent on public service. So for me, I joined because I cared about my community. And I believe a lot of law officers don't join the law enforcement ranks because of the financial gains from it. I believe they do it because they care deeply about their community and they want to make a difference in their community. And so we need to defend our police officers and be there and give them support. And I could tell you, we do already have oversight. It's called the ballot box. If you don't like what's going on, you elect a new sheriff. But he got 76% of the vote, I believe, the last time around. So that means a lot of trust in our sheriff, that he's doing a good job and responding to our needs. So I personally believe that our police department needs more tools in their belt, not less. I believe if you take away things like tear gas and you take away rubber bullets and restraints, then what's that leave? Batons and bullets. And a lot more people are going to get hurt from batons and bullets than they will from a tear gas canister. I remember as a new troop coming into the Air Force in basic training, I got to go walk in a house full of tear gas just to experience it. You didn't want to be there, you left as quick as you could. So the reality is I am completely 100% for our police. Thank you for coming when we need you. When we call 911, you show up. You don't stop and think about it. You don't think about the ramifications. If they could be charged with a crime or whatever, they just show up and they help the situation out. For that, I thank them and I pray for you daily.
Nathan, Sybrandy?
Yeah, I'll try and give a succinct answer so we can get onto the public health topic. That's what I'm looking for. I'm like, let's go. Anyway, we need to make sure our men and women in blue have the resources, the training, and the scope that they need to reach both the highest levels of professionalism and the highest levels of accountability. Right now, we're asking police to do too much. Anytime there's something in our society that we can't handle, that's overwhelming, then we just throw it to the police. So we ask them to be social workers, we ask them to be mental health workers, and it's simply not fair. So all of these spurious calls to defund or abolish the police are completely ridiculous. No serious person is saying things like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. We need to reinvest in our police so that they can focus on what their jobs actually are, and that is fighting crime and keeping our communities safe.
Follow up, Mr. Chase.
Oh, well, actually, I think police are paid pretty well, compared to other vocations, but they deserve to be. I mean, they're looking at a dark side of life that, none of us want to be. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes many times. And of course, what backs up the police too is the Second Amendment. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I think people, weaker people, especially women, need equalizers if they can, and that can actually prevent a lot of crime if people just knew that they can't come up to somebody and rob them or knock them out. But we can't defund police, because that's another important strata in defending us and defending our rights. And that's probably the most important thing government does, is defending our rights.
All right, on to another subject, and it isn't public health this time. Mr. Christian will lead off with this. As the economy stabilizes in time, and it will. I don't know what condition it will be in at the time that it stabilizes, but it will. It's inevitable. It'll be necessary to continue to manage the population and growth in Washington communities and provide for a measured policy that works for all parties in interest. What will you as a legislator bring to that conversation when the time comes?
Well, good question. For myself, I think less regulation is needed. You talked about growth and opportunity. As a realtor, I'm uniquely qualified to talk about the Growth Management Act, and we talk about what was well intended to have folks build houses closer to schools and services, police and fire, things like that. It's had a lot of unintended consequences. By limiting the amount of land to build or to build new houses, you've made it very hard or difficult to have affordable housing, which is increasing our homeless population, and because homes just aren't affordable in Spokane anymore. The last house I received an offer, put on the market, we had 18 offers on that home. 18 offers. That's a lot of families looking to find a home in Spokane. It should not be that way. And so when you talk about our what we can do to improve when the economy stabilizes, I think it's important that we start opening up our regulations as well. I'll open up our growth management area, open up the way businesses are allowed to handle customers. Right now, a restaurant is limited at 50%. How would you like to have to run your family at half your income? Well, that's what they're being forced to do right now. I know in one state, the hotel can only have 50% of the rooms rented at any given time. Really, there's a wall between them. But that's what their state is mandating for that. So it's important that we allow businesses to start doing the job and open the economy again.
Okay. Mr. Sybrandy?
I think the paradigm when it comes to growth management and when it comes to land use law is all wrong. Right now, the paradigm is that the government bequeaths upon you all of these things that you are allowed to do with your property, and it says, look at all these things that the benevolent government is allowing you to do with your property, and I think that's just utterly absurd. The paradigm really should be that the assumption is whatever you want to do with your property, you're allowed to do it unless the government can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, just like in a court of law, that it causes net negative externalities in a way that makes an overwhelming case for saying you can't do something. That's my general approach to it. Beyond that, the GMA clearly needs to be reformed to allow for more local flexibility. I saw firsthand in the 2016 cycle when I was working on a political campaign in the Bothell area that the negative effects that arbitrary GMA policies have in the Clearview community up there. They were just outside of the urban growth boundary, and as a result of that, they could not get sewer services, and you should have seen the number of people who would meet on a weekly basis. They would completely pack their community gathering center every single week, meeting with different legislators and government officials trying to get sewer services. It was such an obvious need. There's an arbitrary law in the books that was completely inflexible, and it was ridiculous. Change clearly needs to come.
All right, Mr. Gurel.
Again, I'm a little bit puzzled by some of the the blowback about the Growth Management Act. My understanding of the Growth Management Act is that it gives counties the discretion, and it gives county commissioners the discretion to make the decisions about how to regulate growth in their community. I think it is important that we not have unregulated growth. And once again, I think this is a good area for local control. I think the fact that setting the growth management boundaries is up to the community, up to the county, puts it right where it should be. And so that's my take on Growth Management Act. As far as just saying that less regulation is better, I don't agree. I think that the only one who makes out well when you stop guarding the hen house is the fox. And I think that there is a role for government to protect us, to protect individuals, and to not leave it to the open market to protect us.
Okay.
Okay, my first race was against Senator Bob McCaslin, and that was 20 years ago. And we became friends after that, and he became one of my mentors. And he told me the worst mistake he ever made in Olympia was letting the Growth Management Act out of committee. He never thought it would pass, but it did. So I know Senator Brian Dansel, I think, got a bill passed a few years ago that a county under 50,000 people, I believe, could actually opt out of growth management. I would make that to any county, whatever the size, could opt out of growth management. They want it, fine. But actually, I understand growth management actually creates more unaffordable housing in the areas where it's been applied. And things like the Hearst decision, that had to do with a watershed in Whatcom County. Well, then the Supreme Court passed that, and it applied to every single county, no matter what their watershed was like. So you shouldn't broad brush things like that. You should leave some, like I say, decentralized. You should leave some autonomy to the county commissioners to decide on things like that. And I'm always for less regulation, less taxes, more freedom.
All right, and a final from you.
Final on that, I would encourage you to talk to the county commissioners about the urban growth area and that bill. It's gotten so out of hand in some of our, let's say in Oregon and Portland area, that if your house burns down and you are within a certain distance of a rail line, you can no longer build your house. You have to build a multi-family unit in the footprint of that house that burned down. So while the bill may have had some good intentions, the reality is it's hurting the people it was designed to hurt by taking away the affordability of housing because it's just making land more scarce to build on. And our population here in Spokane is continuing to grow, but the house availability and the land availability is not growing. So if nothing else, at least tie the UGA to the amount of population growth in the county.
All right, we're within the last 4 or so minutes, so I'll require a rather quick answer from each of you, and this would be specific to you. Why, Mr. Sybrandy, should you be the next representative from the 4th District?
Well, we have a crisis of trust in our institutions right now, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that even here in Spokane County, our county health officer went on the record in the Spokesman Review accusing the President of the United States of caring more about re-election than the lives of his citizens. Then after criticizing conservatives for demonstrating against his restrictions here in the county, he then marched in a protest himself. We need to see fundamental changes in terms of the way that public health interacts with conservatives, and I'm uniquely qualified to bring that about. Again, we need the calm demeanor and the staunch advocacy of a nurse to bring about the change that we need here in the 4th Legislative District.
Mr. Chase, same question to you.
Okay, I'd be a good representative because I believe truth matters. I kept my 2-term pledge for county treasurer and ran for county commissioner, and I knew that would be a tough deal, but I still did it because I had said that. I also spearheaded successful legislation in Olympia as county treasurer to allow people, first time in state history, to make partial payments on their property taxes. A lot of people, and that came from the people that came to my office, and I said, well, I can't do anything about your law says you can pay twice a year, but I disagree. Even the IRS takes partial payments. So come to Olympia with me and we'll get it changed. And we did too. We stayed at the Motel 6 and met with everybody we could. And although all the other county treasurers, 38, were against it, it passed unanimously in the legislature.
All right, Mr. Christian.
I believe that this is going to be the most challenging session ever. Now, I think we should have had a special session. I know as an aircraft pilot myself, if the engine stops turning, you immediately take actions to extend your time in the air. You reduce yourself to the best glide speed. You start looking for a place to put that plane down and save your life. We've done none of that. We've had a governor that just continues to make his own plans and his own policies. And we should have had this special session to bring in the elected officials that represent the people who elected them to help make these decisions, and not just one individual. Now, I agree in emergency powers, but there needs to be a limit on that. Maybe 30, 60 days, and then you need to call a special session. In this case, we have a budget that's bleeding cash, and we need to stop. We should not be giving pay raises, 3% pay raises to state employees and teachers just to turn around and say, guess what, now we're probably gonna have to fire you or lay you off because there's no money left over. I'm sure they would have rather not had the pay raise and still had the job, because there's a family behind those jobs. So for myself, I believe I'm uniquely qualified because I've been there before. I've already started to have relationships developed on both sides of the aisle. I know what it's going to take together to work together to solve this issue. I have a master's degree in business administration. I know how to deal with budgets. I dealt with budgets in the Air Force as an aircraft mechanic. I had $1 million in parts every day that I had to deal with. So I know how to deal with budgets. I was on the budget committee and the capital budget committee. So I know what it takes to make those budgets balance. If you want to know more about me, look at my website, leonardchristian.com, or give me a call. I'll be glad to have coffee with you.
All right, and Mr. Gurel?
I'm running for state representative because I believe that Eastern Washington deserves somebody who will truly represent all the people of Eastern Washington. I believe that everyone deserves a place at the American table, whether you're fifth generation or a newly arrived American. No matter what you look like or what you believe or who you love, you deserve a representative who's going to stand up for you. I'm running because my values teach me to serve my community and to stand up for those who are not able to speak well for themselves. I'm an accountant, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I will be a compassionate voice for all of Eastern Washington at the new budget talks in Olympia. Please vote on August 4th. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we thank you for your participation today, and of course we thank our audience for watching this conversation. On behalf of Spokane Talks, I'm Mike Fitzsimmons. Thanks for watching us today.